I would say ESG is certainly one of the buzzwords in the real estate market in France. The institutional investors have now the ESG representatives, the directors doing that on a professional basis full time. So you see that we are taking that serious. But in real estate, I have very often the impression it's only about the E we are talking, the environment, less about S and G. So, and I think it's understandable that that's certainly of main focus, because we have this décret tertiaire, as we say. It's nothing else than the government has decided to put into place a kind of a legal framework by which the electricity consumption should be reduced over the next, let's say, 30 years by 40, 50, 60%. So that's something which is major and which is particularly important in Paris, where we have all the Haussmanian buildings, which are historical buildings, which you have, where you have an interdiction to touch on the facade, for example. And in so far, that's certainly something which is interesting and challenging for the investors, because once in a while you will not be allowed to let these buildings to customers anymore if you are not compliant with the environmental legislation. So that's something which is important to keep in mind. Second, you are touching on something which is certainly also of major importance and directly related to the ESG discussion, that are the office buildings outside in the outskirts of Paris, where we have buildings from the 70s and 80s, which are certainly not built with a view on saving of energy or whatever you have. So that is something, they may be out of use within the next decade. So you have to have a kind of a game plan what to do with buildings which have become obsolete. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but it's obsolete, as the French people are saying. And there you have, as you just mentioned, the difficulty to put a new utilization to the building. And I think as we have a lot of issues with regard to the housing in Paris, because it's very, how to say it, limited, we would like to transform this kind of commercial buildings into buildings for students, buildings for living, eventually co-living, what you have. And that's something which is not easy to implement, because it's a political decision if you can do that, because the municipality will lose a little bit of tax income if the office is moved out, and they will have to provide infrastructure for people who come in for living in these buildings. So it's a little bit a kind of an exercise to have the discussion with the mayor and with the urban planning department about this kind of getting the authorization for doing so. And in this regard, I think it's important to raise it and to see how we can do that, and if that is nothing, how we can reuse the building with another functionality. And so far, I think it's really some of the hot topics in the market, how to see these obsolete buildings be transformed into something else.